It's not quite a Passan bomb yet, but the Mariners could be very well on their way to receiving some Passan bombs this trade deadline. Colton, Passan has released his trade deadline preview. It's only the beginning of June, so we've got about a month and a half to get there, but Passan listed some unloaders, some fringe teams, and at the very tail end of this article, our likely adders. Seattle Mariners are, or not likely, sorry, definite adders are listed. It's not a question of whether they're going to add, Colton. It's whom they're going to add. Passan caps off this article with, there's some names listed. I feel like we should go maybe slightly just through who he lists as the unloaders are to see if there's anything noteworthy on those teams to kind of see what else is out there, because a lot of the names that are being thrown around for the Mariners are the usual suspects, I think, as far as trade packages have been kind of going around. And again, a lot can change in a month and a half, but the White Sox, the Rockies, the Angels, the Marlins, the Mets, the Athletics, and the Nationals are teams listed as far as definite unloaders, teams that are going to be shipping guys out. Anything there that you want to touch on before we get to the names that Passan listed, Colton?
No, I mean, I think that there is a guy, at least one guy on each team that does make a lot of sense. For the Mets, it could be JD Martinez. It could even be Harrison Bader, honestly, is a guy that makes a lot of sense. We'll talk about Pete Alonso in a little bit when we go down to the Passan part of this, talking about the Mariners. Andrew Nardi's a guy I really like from the Marlins. They talked about Michael Kopech with the White Sox as well. I think does make a little bit of sense. Garrett Crochet, maybe. Although I know that
Whoa.
I know that there's going to be a lot of people vying for his services. So I don't know. I think that there are plenty of guys that do make a lot of sense throughout the league, and Tanner Scott, another guy. But it really does, when it comes to the way that this Mariners team is set up for the trade deadline this year, they need to be going for it. And I think we all agree that they have put themselves in a position to be a few pieces away, and likely it being offensive pieces away from making a real run at this thing. With that being said, it's tough to see if any of these teams have the pieces that you need as the Mariners at this time, right here, like you said, beginning of June, that makes sense for them offensively to go out and get. There's always going to be relievers on the trade market, but offensively, it really is those four big guys that Passan talks about that make the most sense for the Mariners.
And a guy that isn't listed, say, for us, is listed for the Phillies. Like Kyle Tucker is listed, if he's available, that the Phillies should go out and maybe snag him. If he's available, I think that then lessens the market value for the first guy on the list for the Seattle Mariners is Luis Robert. And it's a conversation that's been happening the entire offseason. I feel like it was happening last deadline too, for a bit. Like there's been conversation about what the Mariners could maybe try and get out of Luis Robert and what they'd have to give up. And I'm mentioning Tucker being available, maybe even Randy Arozarena being available. If it's just Luis Robert, the price is going to get hiked up. And I'm never going to, I mean, I might wish on the Astros downfall. Heck, the Astros. But it's going to be interesting if it's just Robert that's available, because there have already been some mock, I want to say, packages being thrown out. Ball cap, Jim Riley has already posted. He does a lot of live stream talking about trades and stuff like that. Good at what he does. Emerson, Farmelo, Teddy McGraw, Ben Williamson is what he listed as a trade package for Luis Robert. I saw a lot of people saying that's a fleece. I think it's two top five guys. Realistically, Farmelo's probably close to being top five, if not top five in a lot of people's systems. And Emerson, I think, has shot his way up to being the consensus one for a lot of people that follow the Mariners farm system closely. McGraw is a mid, like 15 to 20 pitching prospect. And then Ben Williamson, he's on the older end as far as prospects are concerned, but he's hitting very well. So he's a guy that could be an MLB bat that's ready next year for the White Sox. I think honestly, it's an okay trade to make. But with Luis Roberts' injury history and your concerns about maybe his level of commitment, just given his situation in Chicago, am I willing to give up Colt Emerson and Johnny Farmelo? I'd prefer not to, personally. I'm not the highest on Luis Robert. Good defensively in center field. If he's going to go out and play a corner for you, even better. There's a lot to like about Luis Robert, but Colton, I think you're with me. I'm a little hesitant, mainly because of the injury history.
Luis Robert, like you said, is a great player when he's healthy. but people have equated him quite a bit to Teoscar Hernandez. And the ceiling, in my opinion, the ceiling of Luis Robert is much higher than Teoscar Hernandez
Yes.
because Luis Robert can actually play the outfield, is gonna do pretty good at it. He can give you a day. He can give Julio a day off in center field. His contract, they have two club options for him in 26 and 27, both at $20 million apiece. So that's a hefty chunk of change in those years when you're trying to either extend or re-sign guys like Logan Gilbert and Cal Raleigh. And so the Mariners have the money, and John Stanton said they have the necessary resources to go out there and make the trades they need to go for it this year. Obviously, talk is cheap, and we've seen how cheap that our boy Johnny Boy Stanton can be. If they go out there and make this trade for Luis Robert, could they afford club options on him if they do also include extensions or re-signings for Cal Raleigh and Logan Gilbert? Yes, they could afford it, but will they? I'm not sure. And the amount that it would cost, like you said, Colt Emerson's a guy who could come up not next year, but maybe at the beginning of 26.
Yeah.
And be in the middle of the infield for you. I feel like Cole Young could come up the end of next year. Like the offensive side of things for the Mariners, yes, they need to add to it. There's no doubt about that. With that being said, over the next 2-ish years, the Mariners are going to be getting a ton of guys offensively to add to this team. But what matters is 2024, and if you have to give up some of your closer to major league level talent to do it, then that's what the Mariners are going to have to go do, Joe. We talk a little bit about Pete Alonso here, who's having a really down year. He will be a free agent at the end of the season. This trade is one that might make a little bit more sense simply because you offload his contract at the end of the season. Overall for Pete Alonso, I think that he has been at first base. He's up to a 129 OPS plus now. So he's kind of turned it around a little bit. He's still hitting 238, 315, 477, Joe, with those 14 home runs. Do you think that he makes sense for the Mariners right now?
Positionally, it gets challenging, right? Because you have Ty, you have Mitch Garver. Mitch Garver seems like he's sliding into a more backup catcher role with DHing, like sharing time DHing more so with Mitch Haniger, allowing Dom and Luke Raley out in the corners. I think if you add Pete Alonso, it just kind of muddies what those roles are. Not to say that I would prefer Mitch Garver to get at bats over Pete Alonso, but it's hard for me to imagine the Mariners moving away from Garver after signing him this offseason. So, do I think Alonso makes sense? I'd give it like a coin flip. It can. There just other things have to happen, I think. And there was a trade, I can't remember where it stemmed from. It was a while ago, like earlier this year, where it was Emerson Hancock for Ty France going for Pete Alonso. And I think that trade makes sense. I think the Mets laugh at it, though, is the issue. Because, sure, like Ty France, he won't be a free agent until 2026. So they've got a little bit more time with him. And obviously Hancock, he could be your the Mets number 5 if they really wanted to. And Ty on the year, he's got his OPS plus up to 110. So a little bit lower than Pete as far as production is concerned. I still think the Mets would want maybe not another piece, but more impact from either side of that trade. Like if they're selling Pete Alonso, like why would they want Ty France? Maybe they prefer a Tyler Locklear in that situation. Maybe they value that control a bit more. And so would I give up Locklear and Hancock for Pete Alonso while retaining Ty France? Like, I don't know. I'd probably rather keep Tyler Locklear. So it's like, It's an interesting one. I understand like we're in a win now phase. Like you can't waste the pitching any longer, but like it's a situation where the right package has to come up. You can't just throw away everything for a rental or whatever. You can't get, not to say that we're worried about Jerry Dipoto and Justin Hollander getting fleeced, but also like if you bring in a guy and it doesn't work out, then it's even like an even more like bad taste in your mouth. And for me, I think I'd prefer going out and getting Robert over Alonso, not just on a talent level perspective, but as far as like roster fit is concerned, I think it makes more sense. The guy that's in that same vein, it's not listed in Passan's article, is Brent Rooker. Another guy like in a corner outfield spot is Randy Arozarena. I think you can get Rooker and Arozarena for probably something similar in package to each other. Like whatever you give up for Rooker, you're probably giving up for Arozarena just because of Arozarena's past and his pedigree and what he's done. He's having a down year. Rooker's having the better year. Kind of pick your poison. Do you want playoff Randy? Do you want Rooker who's OPSing over 900 on the year? Because Randy's having a down year. It's an interesting thing. Teams like the Rays might not be selling. The A's should be. So there's a lot that can change in a month and a half. Rooker or Rosarena are not listed for the Mariners, so I don't want to talk about them too much, Colton, because these last two guys here that you've already covered, Guerrero and Bo Bichette, some Nepo babies from the Toronto Blue Jays. Colton, your package in the video that you did when the BR walk-off stuff got announced was Harry Ford, boo. Boo this man. Tyler Locklear, Ryan Bliss, Jonathan Clase, and Emerson Hancock. I think my only issue, I don't even know if I have an issue with it, because you're getting Vlad Jr., who would be your everyday DH, realistically. Maybe give Ty a day, whatever. It's kind of a similar problem with Vlad, but you're getting... It's a similar problem with Pete Alonso, sorry. But you're getting Vlad Jr., who is having a very good year. He started off slow, has definitely returned to form, I would say. Not quite the same big bopper output, but a 130 OPS plus. He's definitely... He's back-ish. Bo Bichette is the bigger concern offensively just because he is still a little bit on the slower end as far as like what his typical numbers are concerned. Only an 83 OPS plus on the year. He's not going to play shortstop for you. He'd play second or third. I don't know. Like, you kind of already talked about it, so I don't want you to like reiterate, but I think you've got a better perspective on it since you've kind of already fleshed it out.
I think that this is the kind of move that the Mariners may be willing to do simply because these guys both are under contract for 2 more years. So you'd have them a year and a half or so. Mm-hmm. You'd have them the rest of this season, and then you'd have them next year as well. Same thing with Luis Robert. Like, for the Mariners, the biggest trade they've ever made in the Jerry Dipoto era was the Luis Castillo trade. They had him for another year and a half or so, but then they went out and extended him. The hard part with getting a guy like Alonso or with Robert, they're both Boris clients, so you're not extending them.
Yeah.
And that's something the Mariners have to take into account when adding these guys. You're not going to extend them. So at that point, you kind of handcuff yourself into the rest of the season for Alonso, or possibly 2 years with Robert, depending on how you want to work out his options. The other thing is that we know that Hollander and Dipoto are in the last year of their deal. Because of that, they should be and will be more willing to go out there and add at this trade deadline to hopefully make a run at this thing so they can keep their jobs. Because of the fact that the Mariners are already off to such a great start. They're first place. They have a pretty solid lead on their division. Because of that, they might be more willing to trade off, top end talent to get the finishing touches and continue this strong surge from their team. Obviously, we know the Mariners have the easiest strength of schedule the rest of the way. By adding some of these guys, you almost, I wouldn't say guarantee, because nothing's ever a guarantee, but you give yourself an even better chance at making the playoffs and making a run at this thing by adding the offense that you need, especially early. Like, if they can do this week, next week, like, I don't think it'll happen. But if they could do it within the next couple of weeks, and instead of having these teams wait out the market, which I do think this is what these teams will do, especially the Blue Jays, who probably think they still have a chance.
Yeah, they've won, I think, 6 of the last 7, so they've definitely kind of, I think, exited the fringe and could be right there at the deadline as like a weird in-betweener.
The most realistic player that I think we've talked about, at least that Passan mentioned, is Robert, in my opinion. I think that he's the one that makes the most sense from a position player standpoint. We know for a fact the White Sox are selling, but there are going to be like I think it was the Phillies that said that they will go out and they will add to this team as well. Obviously, they've had one of the best starts ever.
Yeah.
And so the Phillies are a team that I could easily see going out and trying to get Robert as well, a Rosarena, or even Kyle Tucker, like this mentioned in the article. So it's going to cost a lot to go out there and get these guys. So I'm not going to say, as we sit here on June 6th, that if the Mariners don't add one of these 4 guys, it's a failure. Because frankly, there are going to be teams out there that are willing to offer a lot. With that being said, the Mariners have one of the best farm systems in all of baseball, and especially guys that are close to the big leagues in terms of Cole Young, Colt Emerson, Tyler Locklear. These guys all could be here within the next year or 2. And so because of that, teams that might be looking to accelerate their rebuild, like the Blue Jays, they might want to, or even the Mets, for example. The Mets probably want to accelerate the rebuild because they play in New York. They don't want to go into full rebuild mode. They might be willing to take some of these guys that are closer to the big leagues. We did see that it was the GM of the Blue Jays say that they don't expect to trade Guerrero or Bichette.
Yeah.
Obviously, still a lot of time left, but I think that as we look forward to this trade deadline and as we move forward, as we know the Mariners are going to be big players in it, we're going to have to start looking at the teams that maybe are more so out of it. And at that point, it's hard to find guys that really fit this team.
I'm going to leave you here. You mentioned Robert as the main one that makes sense. And I think that rings true for a bunch of different things based on team competitiveness, position player, whatever. The original package that I said, like I mentioned, I want you to compare these two. It's Cole Emerson, Johnny Formello, Teddy McGraw, Ben Williamson. Then Mariners community member on Twitter, X Jage, put out a package that he likened to the Christian Yelich package. I want you to tell me which one you'd prefer the Mariners to give up for Luis Robert.
I voted no on that one already.
So I'm going to say it to the people. You guys have probably already seen it if you're on Mariners Twitter, but it was Cole Young, Lazaro Montes, Jimmy Joyce, and then Alberto Rodriguez. That was proposed by Jage. You're saying no on that one, but would you say yes to the other one where it's Colt Emerson, Johnny Formello, Teddy McGraw, and Ben Williamson?
You have to.
You have to.
You have to go out there and get this offseason. Good Lord. This trade deadline this is the time to go out there and make the trade. And would I get over trading Lazaro Montes in Jage's package? Sure.
Maybe.
The only reason that I like the other package more, the Colt Emerson package, is because Cole Young's closer.
Yeah.
And Lazaro Montes is tearing it up. And look, he is going to be soaring up boards over the next, few months.
Mm-hmm.
I think that he's a guy that when at the end of the year, when we look back at the prospect rankings, he'll be in the top 20.
Whoa.
That's what I think. That's where I think Lazaro Montes will be. The top 20.
You've got him absolutely skyrocketing. Yeah, I look at these packages and I think of trying to substitute out like one of the young Montes or Emerson for like a Michael Arroyo and Aiden Smith situation where you take out one of the top fives and you plug in like a 7 through 12 kind of spot, because Aiden Smith is also a guy that's risen up a lot of boards. Arroyo's kind of stayed around in that like probably like 6 to 8 range. So it's interesting. Ultimately, there's no right answer, and we'll never know until the trades do happen. But Colton, we had some Mariners community members kind of tell us what trades that they thought could happen. We went and ranked a bunch of them. Do you think if they're watching this video, they've watched that one?
Let's find out, Joe. Click on this video on the screen right now and watch that video. We appreciate you guys watching this video, and go Mariners.